The last patient in a small town far from the hustle and bustle of big cities, there stood an old hospital named Santika Hospital. Known to the locals as a haunted hospital, the building held many horror stories from the past. Many claimed to hear strange noises, see shadowy figures, or feel sudden chills when passing by the hospital. This story begins with a patient named Rudy. Rudy was a middle-aged man who had just been transferred to Santika Hospital after being involved in a severe car accident. His condition was critical, and since the ICU at other hospitals was full, he had to be treated at Santika. Rudy's first night at the hospital felt like an endless nightmare. In the dark and silent night, Rudy awoke with piercing pain all over his body. He slowly opened his eyes and looked around. The room was dark, illuminated only by a small lamp in the corner. Suddenly, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. The steps were heavy and dragging, like someone struggling to walk. Rudy tried to call for a nurse, but his voice was too weak. The door to Rudy's room slowly opened, revealing the figure of a woman in a dirty, tattered white gown. Her face was obscured by long, tangled hair, and her dark eyes radiated hatred. The woman approached Rudy, and an icy coldness enveloped the room. Rudy felt as if he were being stabbed by thousands of ice needles. He couldn't move, only stare at the woman with wide eyes. The woman whispered in a raspy, terrifying voice, "You will die here." The voice echoed in Rudy's ears, sending shivers down his spine. The woman then vanished, leaving Rudy in a state of sheer terror. The next morning, the nurse found Rudy lying on the floor in a worse condition. They quickly put him back in bed and called the doctor. Rudy tried to recount what had happened, but no one believed him. They thought he was hallucinating due to the sedatives. However, the nightmare repeated the following night. This time, Rudy saw shadows moving on the walls of the room. The shadows resembled people in agony, writhing in pain. They screamed silently, begging for help that never came. Rudy felt like he was drowning in a sea of suffering. Days passed, and Rudy's condition worsened. Each night, he was haunted by the woman and the horrifying shadows. He couldn't sleep, eat, or even speak clearly. Rudy felt his life slowly being drained by the evil force inhabiting the hospital. On his last night, Rudy saw something terrifying. On the wall of his room appeared writing scrawled in blood. "Welcome to hell," it read. Rudy felt his entire body shiver. He knew his time was near. Suddenly, the door to his room burst open, and the figure of the woman appeared again. This time, she was not alone. Behind her, countless shadows that Rudy had seen before emerged. They approached, getting closer, until they finally enveloped Rudy's entire body. The next morning, the nurse found Rudy lifeless in his bed. His face was pale and etched with a deep expression of fear. The blood-written message on the wall remained clearly visible. Santika Hospital was eventually closed a few months later following a series of other strange incidents. However, the story of Rudy and other patients who had been treated there continued to spread, adding to the haunted reputation of the hospital. To this day, the hospital remains empty, a silent monument to the horror stories that once took place within its walls.